The topic of this video is adding and subtracting integers. So the first thing I want to remind you is that an integer is any positive or negative whole number. So no fractions, no decimals. First we'll look at adding together integers. When you add integers, there are two basic rules you have to remember. The first one is that if your two numbers, your two integers, have the same sign. So in this first problem we have -2 and -5, which are both negative, so they have the same sign. What you're going to do is add the numbers. So I'm going to add the 2 and add the 5 to get 7. And then we're going to keep the sign. So that means my answer is going to be negative. So when I add two negatives, I get a negative answer. If I added two positives, I would get a positive answer. Our second rule occurs when our two numbers that we're adding have a different sign. So -11 and +2. When our two numbers have a different sign, what we're going to do is, again, ignore the signs and just subtract the numbers. So we've got 11 and 2, so we'll say 11 minus 2 is 9, and then we're going to take the sign of the larger number. So since 11, we're ignoring the negatives. Since 11 is bigger than 2, our answer is going to be negative because 11 was negative. Now we'll try a couple more. In this first example, we have -6 plus 8. So we have two numbers, a negative and a positive, which means we're going to subtract the 8 and the 6. So we always do the larger one minus the smaller one, so 8 minus 6 is 2. And then if we compare 6 and 8, 8 is larger and 8 is positive, so our answer is positive. In number 2, we have -3 plus -7. Since these have the same sign, we're going to add the 3 and the 7 to get 10. And then since they're both negative, our answer will be negative, because when we have the same sign, we add and keep the sign. In number 3, we have two numbers, -125 and +125. They have opposite signs, so what we're going to do is subtract them. 125 minus 125 gives us 0. And 0 is a number that's neither positive nor negative, so we don't have to worry about a sign. Once you've mastered adding integers, subtracting is a breeze. So the rule for subtracting integers is that subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So an opposite is the number with the opposite sign. So the opposite of a positive is a negative. The opposite of a negative is a positive. What this means is that every single subtraction problem can be rewritten as addition, which we already know how to do. So what we're going to do is rewrite all of these subtraction problems as addition problems and then add them. So when you see -5 minus +2, that's really saying -5 plus -2. And notice when you write negatives after plus signs, usually you put them in parentheses. So then what we've got here is a negative plus a negative. So we know when our two numbers have the same sign, we add them. So 5 plus 2 is 7, and then we keep the sign negative. We've got 11 minus 13. That's really 11 plus -13. Now we've got two numbers with opposite signs, so we subtract. 13 minus 11 is 2. We take the sign of the larger, which is -13. Number 3, we see 2 minus -5. So that's really 2 plus +5, because we're adding the opposite. So the opposite of -5 is +5. So 2 plus 5, we've got the same sign, so we add, keep the original sign, it's positive. In number 4, we see -3 minus -6. So what we write is -3, and then minus means add the opposite. So I'm going to add the negative. So instead of subtracting -6, I'm adding +6. And then we have two numbers with opposite signs. So 6 minus 3 is 3. We take the sign of the larger, which was 6, so it's positive. So our answers are -7, -2, +7, and +3. Notice a rule that you remember from middle school is that anytime you have two negatives, that turns into a positive. And when you have just a negative, what's really happening is that negative is sticking onto the 2, sticking onto the 13, so you can think of it as adding negative 2 and adding negative 13. So that's it with adding and subtracting integers. Now it's time for some practice.